We're at step 13. And people should be able to hear us. Can you hear us, Mr. Mike?
I can hear you. Thank you.
Awesome. Thank you guys.
Perfect.
I appreciate it.
No problem. And if you have any issues or anything, like if that disconnects, the meeting will continue. You know what I
Okay.
mean? If one or the other disconnects, so you
All
can
right.
just join it again.
All right, awesome.
Yeah.
Thank you so much.
You do see like who's on the Zoom, so I do like this a lot.
Yeah, in case I need to kick anyone out.
This is called
Or you can like
confidence.
like,
Okay, perfect.
And I'm in spirit.
Thank you, Jenna.
No, thank you guys. I appreciate it. It's my second time doing it, so in this room.
Oh, because the other one's different.
Yeah, and Chris is usually the one that does the COA ones in here, and then I just join remote.
Is he away? Is he traveling? Nice.
He's away this week.
Very nice.
Dartmouth. Yeah. Great. Thank you. I appreciate it.
I have FinCom next door.
Ooh, that's fun. Big Help's way more fun than Fin. Don't tell anyone. Studios.
Oh, I always forget it. Is it 1 hour or 2 hours? Oh, that was a mistake I made. One. There is one.
I'm just gonna mute for now. Hold on.
Oh, there's one more.
I'll come after the meeting.
Hey, Fidel.
I'm trying to mute Judas, but that's not working either.
Pleasant trees or
No, there was the, link to the.
nameless.
Thank you very much.
She didn't send it because I.
Minutes, because, sorry, yes.
You're all set to go whenever you're ready.
Okay. So we'll take attendance, Michael Copeland,
Agenda.
Here.
Laura Bucko,
Here.
John Sasso,
Present.
Tom Passons, not gonna be here, Mark Doxer, here, Ron Rossini.
Here.
And John Oldham. Okay, I'll entertain a motion to accept the June minutes, the minutes of the June meeting.
So moved.
Second. Moved in second, any additions, corrections, or deletions? Seeing none. Vote. Michael Copeland,
Aye.
Laura Bucko,
Yes.
John Sasso,
Yes.
Mark Doxer,
Aye.
Ron Mancini,
Yes.
Joan O'Neill, yes. So the minutes are accepted. And then we're gonna have the updates from each working group. What was the fourth one?
Fourth one relates to working with whoever is hired to do the feasibility study, getting
Okay,
information.
all right. So I was gonna say, I think
Coordinating.
probably don't have.
Well, it'd be interesting just to get an update, like where we are in that process with regards to an RFP and when things.
Right, there's something in the
That would
paper
be- that would be
yesterday,
a
but you could,
That would be a good update, I think, at this point.
okay, well, we can.
Okay, so there's a meeting about to take place to have a few people have input to the town manager on the RFP. And then our goal is to issue it very soon. Weeks, few weeks would be the goal.
Wonderful.
Some, it was a September 1st.
Well, I would like to see things move a little bit more quickly, but we have to issue it and then we have to, is it 30 days for responses? I forget, I think it's,
I think it is 30 days.
yeah, I think it's 30 days for responses. So September 1st would be issued.
I'm sorry, the RFP has not been issued or has?
Has not been
Oh,
issued. It is to be issued in the next couple of weeks.
Is there a draft of it?
Well, if there is, I haven't seen it.
Okay, when we go to the finance room.
So, did you get my email?
I just did. Do you want me to try to share my
If
screen?
you could, that would be awesome. Sorry,
No
I
worries.
had an audit yesterday all day, so I've been nonstop. So,
The IRS doesn't come to your house anymore.
it's an ISO audit for
No.
work, so it was even worse than that, but actually it's good.
Okay, sorry.
Takes all of my time up for like a week, it just.
I'll tell you, when we had an IRS audit for my nonprofit years ago, that was the most intense audit. They really looked at minutes for like 2 years at the board, make sure you voted on every contract and, yeah, that was.
All right, so John, Mark, myself and Jenna met last week and we kind of, so the charter of the group from last time was to come up with a plan and kind of present to the group where we are. So in the packet, thank you, Jenna, for including the summary that we put together. I just wanted to give just 2 quick bullets on this. One is just to remind ourselves what is the mission of the finance working group. So this is kind of what this came right out of the re-charter, if you will, for ReCalc. So our focus, we kind of talked a little bit about making sure that we address issues about programs and initiations, some general operating costs and maybe even capital. So we may kind of do a little bit more massaging of exactly what that looks like, but the purpose is just to make sure we have our mission set, which is really kind of review in general what it is, what's it gonna take and what does it look like. So from that, we actually brainstormed in the document that came out with the ReCalc agenda is a summary of a bunch of different areas that we felt would be worthwhile to look into. So I'm not going to go through those. They're there for you to read at your perusal. But I think what we wanted to at least present is what's on slide 2, which is how are we going to work through this? So we basically came up with kind of 5 general plan steps here to walk through from a plan. And the first one is we after going through this, I think we realized that there's no way the 3 of us or with all the, with staff and others are going to get through this. So we really are going to go out and try to solicit for some help to add to the working group. So that's an ongoing piece, and we'll certainly circle back with the team once we have some ideas on that. So then the remaining items are kind of the real action plan aspects, which are what do we really want or need to know from other communities, and to do that we're gonna kind of create a list of questions. And what we'd like to do, and I think it's important to raise here, is whatever questions we come up with, we want to coordinate with the other working groups so that if there is things that come out of the programming one or the transport one, and we want to ask questions, I think it would be helpful for us to go out with a single consolidated list instead of multiple lists. And that may,
bookmark that point, because there is something from transportation that it would be duplication if we did it separate.
right, no, I think, and we talked about, even if the answers were gonna go out and talk to folks, it's still good to have the list of questions. So that, again, that was a point that I think we all agreed on. Next step is we want to review what our operating budget and allocations are today. Jenna has agreed to help us with that, but that's an important piece that we at least want to know what the baseline is. And then we're going to review, again, in the list is a whole bunch of things that we identify, potential funding sources. We want to review them and understand what they are, whether they're applicable, how to get access to them, what sort of activities would need to take place to get there. So that's what I would say, of all of the things that we've identified, that is the biggest nut to crack for us. It's the lion's share of the work to kind of go through that. So that's an area where, again, more hands, light work. And then the last item, which is an item that we brought up last week, I think, Ron, you actually raised it, is how do we know what it is we're really trying to target? And I think where we want to have a way of estimating kind of what our future needs are, what the budget impact will be, what sort of allocation does that mean from a capital perspective or fundraising or whatever else might take place. So that's a big unknown, but it's something we're going to have to at least start to put together. And I think we will get, as we go through the process with the other working groups and as we work with the consultants, we'll get some more input on that. So that's our plan. I'd like to submit that to the group for consideration. And if anybody has any comments, thoughts, suggestions, certainly open for discussion.
Quick comment on
Sure.
the operating budget impact and estimating the future need. I would strongly suggest that we most certainly don't do that first. That we do it in parallel,
Sure.
maybe, or even following. I just don't want to get hung up on identifying numbers and playing with that instead of figuring out what all the sources.
Yeah, I guess I would say that it's a bit of a logical approach, given that we've got a whole bunch of other things to do first. But I think I suspect the future needs thing will be somewhat of a cyclical kind of development where we might come up with some initial things and then we'll adjust them as we learn more information, and it'll kind of be a living document needs. And
We might get some parameters when we sit down with some of the places that have programs
Oh,
that we
absolutely.
would like, that we think
Yeah.
are good.
yeah, no,
Rather than us having
so
to-
I absolutely agree. It isn't the first item on the list. Jenna, any comments on that? Does that seem to be consistent with what we talked about as well?
Yeah.
One thing I would suggest, on the three reviewing the operating budget, today's operating budget, it might be good to get, the last 5 years or something, averages or.
Yeah. No, that's a good point, Michael. We
Because of the pandemic, is that gonna skew things?
yeah,
No, I don't know.
It's an interesting point.
Normally I'd say yes, but we'd have to, with that caution.
Maybe only the last two.
Yeah, you have historical budget data going back, 15, 20 years you can look at.
Yeah.
So there's all sorts of stuff you can look at. So, I think the answer is that the folks, whoever's gonna be reviewing that is gonna have to make some prudent choices about exactly what's relevant. And
Right.
to your point, given pandemic, that may have had some impacts,
Maybe
but
several years before the
maybe,
pandemic.
I was gonna say, if you look a little before, a little after, so yeah, but good point, Michael, thank you.
And there's been staffing changes too, so. All throughout that period.
Yeah,
Sure.
okay, that's all I have, John, thank you.
Okay.
Okay, is that,
Sure.
any other comments, or did you have a chance to take a look at it?
Mhm.
Ron? Any thoughts on kind of what's there?
I did not have a chance to look at this. What was this
Comments
about?
afterward. This is from, I think Jenna sent a note out first, and then it got it into
Just today?
No,
a couple days ago.
I think I was just.
I think yesterday.
I think it was yesterday I sent everything.
Yeah, it may have only been like yesterday,
Yeah.
so it wasn't
I
too
thought it was
far.
on Monday,
It's
but
like, yeah. Okay,
oh, no, it was, sorry, something else was here.
let's do transportation. I think what the little summary didn't tell you is that one of the things we spent a lot of time on, and because we didn't have the charge in front of us, it was like explore transportation best practices for senior centers is the charge. What we kind of got into is that, are we talking about transportation for all purposes for seniors and not like senior center related? You know, and that we kind of like stumbled around on that because that was a bigger question. You know, and so that being said, so we and later, after I looked at the charge, sent something out to people and to let people know that what the exact charge was. So hopefully that's a little bit helpful.
What was the exact charge?
Okay. And it says, explore transportation best practices for senior centers. That's
Got
it.
So so as a member of the select board and the one who kind of wrote this document, I don't know, I think that it's a little vague on purpose because it's broaching the topic of something broader than just getting people back and forth to the senior center. And understanding what is going on in the world, what options we might have, and I think that is part of what the goal would be.
Well, part of the discussion was kind of like if it's broader, then you get into software systems
Could
as
be.
well, looking at those, because there are some,
Yeah.
you know, that are like, North Reading has one for the town.
Right.
You know, not just for seniors, and do we get into that?
So I'm gonna say yes.
Okay.
I had a discussion with, there's a group that runs Reading Response, that drives for Reading Response, called ATS, Alternative Transportation Solutions. And we recently had a contract negotiation with them, and I brought up to the COO of that group, do you do this in any communities? And he said, oh, absolutely. And I said, well, what kinds of stuff do you do? He said, well, it can be, on demand. It can also be kind of scheduled pickups and routes and schedules, routes, and kind of how things go. So that's the universe. The question I think is what are different people doing that's working well, that's successful? And then we'll have to add parameters like, is it affordable? What is the broader vision of doing this? I don't think we know yet.
I think two aspects, and one is that, I already did some research looking what you could find online as far as the different candidates. You can't really get good details yet. And what we really also want to know is the cost. And so that, when I saw that, I'm saying, well, we don't want to just be asking the cost for transportation and then be going back to them for, what are their broader operating costs? So I'm thinking we fold that into, the finance side of it, but can bring in, transportation people because we're gonna need it. The financing is a big issue.
Oh, absolutely.
When I was thinking about this initially, putting the finance aside for the moment, I think Mark's point is a good one, which is we really want to understand, I use the term best practices, but what is working in other communities? And you might find a community that says, well, hey, like Boston, what works for Boston? Well, MBTA. Well, that doesn't work for us out here, right? You might find another community that says, well, we have a regional transportation authority, and that works great for us. But I think it's still worth understanding what all those different options and things are, And you may off the top of your hat say, okay, well, these three, they're financially completely unattainable, but that's okay. I still think it's worth understanding what that universe looks like.
So one of the places that had been pointed out was Andover, that has a good program. So John Parsons was going to try to set up a meeting with Jane Burns.
Yeah.
And find out exactly how they do it.
Yeah.
And what is it that they do. I did arrange, I'm gonna be meeting with Mystic Valley next week, which is a combination of the finance and the transportation. Because in at least two of those towns that I looked at, their biggest thing for transportation was the Mystic Valley program. You know, and then I looked, so I went on Mystic Valley's website to try to see what is this, you know, and it includes Reading
Yeah.
as the catchment area. So I'm gonna sit down with the director of programs and the director of the agency for that, and also I want to talk about food service. And things that may help us with, what are the possible things we can get resources?
Mystic Valley, that's Mystic Valley Elder Services?
Yes.
Yeah, okay.
Because they're the biggest
Right, yeah.
They used to, didn't the senior center used to have Mystic Valley before?
Yes.
We used to do community meals and we still use them for the home pack meals now too. So it's a budgeted line
But they used to
item.
deliver to the senior center before.
Mhm.
Yes.
Yeah.
And they
There
have
used to be
new theater,
volunteers that came
so-
in and were all served safe and served the food for us and all that.
Because one of the things they do for the transportation, at least this much I know, but I want to know how they, it's nuts and bolts that you don't get from the online. They actually give people a budget that they can pay a neighbor or a friend, you know, a family member to provide the transportation for them. I
Buddy system almost.
want to know the details, you know, I want to find out the details. How do they assign a budget? Is there a needs thing? It doesn't say that. And it's free. Because they get some special funding, I know, for that. So that's gonna happen. Also, John contacted Chris, Council on Aging, because I suggested Massachusetts Council on Aging Association. They're a resource that can tell us what are some of the places to turn to for transportation. You know, best practices for transportation. And then, based on that, we can be following up to some of those places, so we get more in depth. Other than that, Michael, we had, the,
What is this map?
okay. This was done by Tom.
Model.
He actually had prepared this as part of an addendum to the presentation that was done to the select board, but never got to this component. Was it the select board or the town meeting?
It was, I want to say town meeting, but I'm not sure.
Okay, so anyway, transportation was one of his things. So we had him in our meeting. And he's willing to help us in the future as well. So that's a resource that we have utilized and we're gonna continue to utilize. So he's looked at, the volunteer program, the Uber, some are doing Uber, some are doing Lyft, some subsidies, and just even my looking at communities, some communities, are subsidizing significantly, others not as much. It varies, like in one community, it's $2 one way, $4 round trip within the community, 4 and 8 outside, so there are all sorts of possibilities. So we're gonna be getting more details on these various options that you see up there. And the volunteer programs, we did in the discussions agree the problem with the volunteer programs is if you need to go into Boston, that's
But that's a real need.
that's a real need, but that
I know,
has broken volunteer
Broken
programs,
people.
right, because it's the traffic, the uncertainty of the scheduling, people, you know, you can't plan on, this is gonna take an hour of my time. You know, it's, so, and now it's even worse. And that was always the issue, but now it's, and also what you need, well, not as much for our community, but a lot of communities, you need to also have people who speak different languages. Because people aren't gonna have they'll need to be assisted once they get there sometimes. As far as, we used to have a medical escort program that accompanied transportation just as well. So the people didn't have to drive, we contracted for the driving. That also came up as far as, I'll just leave it at that sort of thing, is that town has 2 vehicles now. And only one is generally utilized. You have 1 full-time driver.
I was gonna ask what the current kind of service model is, just as backdrop to all of this, we should.
Yeah, they have some substitute for when the full-time person is on vacation or out ill, that kind of thing. Which to me wasn't surprising to learn that, because then it got to the issue that you talked about. I think this is a good area to take a look at contracting. You know, it's having 2 vehicles that you're not utilizing, or, you know, that's, if you're gonna have vehicles, either you go all out and have vehicles that you're gonna, a fleet of vehicles that you're gonna use for youth programs, nighttime activities, elders, and then you have a transportation coordinator and the whole thing, and the software system that, you know, and they have software systems package ones that's already there, you don't have to, or you contract. And then it's the contractor's problems. You know, the downtime, sick time, all those kinds of things are built into the price. So I think that's definitely something to take a look at. Though it's sensitive, because I know when you talk about, there's a driver who's very good, everybody agrees the person is, you know, good and provides a little bit extra in the sense that a lot of, because of the liability issues, a lot of the transportation, including even the ride, is curbside pickup. Whereas a lot of people need to be assisted
Yeah, medically.
to the vehicle. But that can be handled in multiple ways. That you may be able to get volunteers.
Well, that's one of the discriminating factors, at least as I understand it with the ride, is the ride is not curb to curb, it's door to door. If I remember correctly, because my father-in-law does the ride and they will help him in all the way up and down the stairs and so.
Oh, escort him right to
Yeah.
In his house?
Into this front door or side door, not all the way in, but just up to the door.
Right, okay.
But that's not curb to curb, that's literally door to door. They're, because of the type of services, they're obviously, I would agree, the liability insurance is way more expensive than anything else that's associated with that, but. The only thing that I was just curious about, and it may not be that critical, is that I guess I was under either the impression or the concept that maybe there were other organizations in town that also had transportation needs. I was thinking like I forget who, like some of the other senior housing things in the community might have their own.
Right.
Either they have their own things or they have needs for that.
Wall Street has.
And I was just wondering if as part of that, we should reach out to them and ask them what they do, because you might end up finding out that they have a need and they have a part-time driver and they're paying a certain amount, and maybe there's a solution that could cover some of those things as well, and there might be a way to fund it in a kind of an independent way with input from those other organizations as a little bit of a thought. So I was just thinking it's something to investigate as well.
They have vehicles too.
They might have vehicles, they might have part-time driver, who knows what they have, I just don't know.
Outside of the assisted livings, I think there are other organizations, but they may not, there's probably more organizations that don't have anything to do with seniors necessarily. There's churches.
Again,
What about like artists?
No, but John, we did talk about, Peter Sanborn Place and
Yeah.
Tanner Village and Pearl Street, and I don't know of what other.
Right, that's why I said assisted living, that's Pearl Street.
And
I I think we heard that Peter Sanborn Place discontinued this, but we definitely.
They may
can-
still have.
We have to find out.
Yeah.
And
But
that's
then- but there
also,
again, though, so is it the broader thing that we're gonna look at what the need is for all?
Well, they're part of the senior community, I would say. And whether or not they actually participate in senior center stuff is, I think, a different question per se.
Right.
And yes, their needs may be met separately, those organizations, and those, actually, the other good thing about contacting them, those organizations may have already figured certain things out that might be helpful to us. Oh yeah, there's this program that we use that all of our seniors, whenever they need to go to a doctor outside or whatever, they may have access to certain things. So, I mean, I still think it's worth having those conversations potentially to get, whether or not even what I thought about would work, they may be sources of information that we just aren't aware of. I don't know.
yeah, and our assumption was that this was town senior services service provided, but we don't know.
Understood.
Right, and to your point, John, there, for certain things, maybe there are fees, but we have to explore kind of how different people do it first.
Right.
That'll help us figure it out. This one feels to me very much like what we did on the financial one, where we kind of looked at all the different sources and ideas like that, and then you can kind of divvy it up, because like if you look at it like this, like on this document, so Tom did this to make it really concise, but you look at it, it's overwhelming. So
Yes, it is.
I think it needs to be carved up, just as we did here in the financial one. I think we can do something very similar here, and then maybe people in the working group can grab a chunk at a time.
Right, but see, we haven't carved it up. We've just
Exactly.
identified it.
Exactly.
And so-
Next step,
You're right, so.
it's Thanksgiving.
Right,
Time to
because what
carve.
we're doing here is carving it up, and I'm kind of like saying, oh,
This
Who's gonna do
we're
this?
still in planning.
This is really good. This is all
Yeah, this
really
is-
great
this is-
information.
This is great.
You guys did a great job with great start.
okay, program.
Mass General, they, through the ride, they have this specific situation. I know someone has it. She does Uber Lyft from here to Mass General, and it's very inexpensive. So that's a specific arrangement
Is that
that they have.
Like funded by
I think Mass
Mass
General, yeah, they give out like
for
coupons.
seniors or anybody?
Yes, well, she's a senior. But it's an Uber Lyft, but it's something that they've,
I wonder if like Melrose Wakefield has similar type things as well. Other medical
And,
facilities.
and that's curb to curb.
yes. Because I know I was talking to one woman who tried to apply for the ride, and she had to go into, this is a senior, had to go into Boston.
Right, Charles.
Just to fill out, and that was a,
Yeah, we
Not
talked
easy for
about
her.
maybe, why don't they do what they do like for Medicare sometimes? Well, they used to do for the MB, not for the Medicare, for the senior transportation for the MBTA. You also have to get the card to go into Boston, but senior centers arrange for
To
them
have
to come
it.
out.
right.
And I'm wondering if, at least on a regional basis, I think we can make the case that they should come to people.
Right.
And I think we'd have a lot more people that would be eligible for the ride. And that's
It'd be great, I mean, yeah,
that's
we can
7 days
find
a week too,
services.
you know?
Yeah,
Yeah.
if we can find other services already available and just find the way to access it, that's great.
All of the above.
All the above.
Okay, programming. The committee members are Michael Coleman, myself, and John Parsons.
Working group, excuse me.
What did we call it? What
Working group.
What did I call it?
A committee.
Oh, excuse me. Strike that from there. We actually did not meet, but I took it upon myself to start this procedure, just because I'm very familiar with the senior center and the programming, and I did meet with Chris Kowalski, who's the administrator, and we've discussed a lot of programming over the past few weeks. So what I did, I just sort of went back to the summary report that we had in the recalc summary in February 2023, and they sort of divided, we have sections.
Are there copies of that?
Yep,
It
it's
should
the
be in
last
the
page of
back.
the packet.
Oh, okay.
Yeah. He sent it to me earlier, but I think it was getting kicked back, so.
So the program offerings, this is the Pleasantries, these are the program offerings currently at the Pleasant Street Center. And they're quite diverse. Chris and his staff, really work hard at looking at what other senior centers do. So what you see in here is reflecting that. So I didn't feel the need to go to other senior centers to find out what they do. I mean, it's pretty much a very, their program is very widespread, lots of programs. His big limiting factor is space. He just can't, I was at a class there on Monday, it was a fitness class, and there was 8 of us outside the actual class. We couldn't even fit in the class. So we couldn't really see the teacher, and we were also sort of getting involved in someone else's office space. It's just not a good environment for the fitness.
Are they hybrid? Just.
No, it's all in person.
I know in Andover.
Well, I mean, there are things on RCTV.
No, but in Andover, their exercises, some people got really used to doing it and like doing it that way from their home. So even though now they're doing it on site, they're also allowing people.
Yeah, so there's a camera that like live streams the
Yeah.
instructor that's doing the class, and you can do it from
Right.
home too.
But the thing is,
Not as a
the first
permanent solution,
no.
but I think
My
it's an
first
option.
bullet's in
Right.
socialization. I mean, if you talk to these seniors, a lot of them are sort of anti-Zoom, they're tired of Zoom. They wanna get out and see people face to face. So, and there is that's what I found, that's what they enjoy and that's what keeps them going. So I think they wanna come to class and they need room to have class. And actually, there isn't even a waiting area for when you're waiting for class. Like they don't want you to even come early because there's no space for you. So that's an important thing for programming, that there's actually waiting areas. But as far as the program offerings, there's everything: art, theater, exercise, trips, games, cards, lectures, intergenerational activities. There's support groups for bereavement, low vision, Parkinson, veterans, movies, there's technology support, a Shine counselor who coaches you through Medicare, and there's social gatherings. And all of this is what was reflected in the surveys in those meetings we had,
Right.
focus groups. The only, few things came up. A cooking class wasn't offered because they actually don't have a functioning kitchen, that would support a whole cooking class, nor actually meal preparation. Hair salon, someone wanted a gym, exercise equipment. They have minimal bands and weights and things like that, language classes, but that's really the very few things that people have requested that's not being offered. Evening weekend programs, Chris has actually started some evening programming and has gotten some good response. There was a request on one of the servers for employment opportunities at the senior center and to have low or no cost programs and services. So I'm not quite sure where else he wanted me to go with the programming for us to look at.
Can I offer a couple
Yeah,
of
yeah,
thoughts?
yeah.
So, 2 things that really come to mind for me are thinking about what programs are being run at different centers that are kind of new, interesting, a little bit different in general. So less so kind of, here's the list of all the things we offer, and more kind of finding out from other centers.
There's not a big secret out there that these places are offering things that we don't have. That's what I feel.
So I guess that's the question I'd love to ask of some other centers. I mean, if they respond with.
But I mean, Chris does a good job. They search these,
Other, what are
Yeah.
published here, but I think
Yeah.
this might be a good part of the interview question. So that's kind of piece 1. And piece 2, which is very related, that we talked about is how do different centers encourage the participation of younger seniors? And are there particular programs that are more interesting? For example, here, I saw language classes,
Yeah.
things listed. You know, how does that work? Travel, things, not so much kind of the old slideshow, here's my trip to wherever I went. And more, hey, if you're planning a trip to such and such a place, here are the things that you want to be thinking about. Here are some tips and ideas and things like that. Or again, thinking about if there are younger seniors that are doing, different kinds of things.
You know what you
How
can
do you
do
track it?
too, I hadn't thought of it, but we started doing it my last couple of years at work, is that most museums, even theaters, and that sort of thing, you buy a block of tickets, you get them at a discount.
In a group rate.
You get a group rate, and it can be substantial in
has
some
that.
cases.
Yeah.
I remember even the Institute of Contemporary Art
We've been doing that.
done it, so we asked them, they said, all right, we'll come up with something, and they did.
Yeah, we've been doing with the mini.
And that's kind of like a no-brainer, and even movie tickets.
Yep, no, there are, well.
There are all sorts of things like that that you could do and for broader,
Yeah.
seniors, but
This isn't a slide at all on kind of what we're doing. But right now, we have some ARPA funds. And we could experiment with some things right now to learn what's interesting to our population, what works, and frankly, what doesn't. We have that chance right now with the ARPA money. When the ARPA money's done, it's gonna be harder. Now you're saying, well, I have to take it from another program in order to do this. So my opinion is there's an opportunity right now, if we identify some interesting things, and if other people, other centers, other whatever, kind of share some of these, I'm calling them innovative, because sorry, I'm writing my innovation
Yeah.
course right now. Maybe that would be stuff for us to think about and could help us kind of go through this. Also, there's the very broad list. We can't do everything all the time at the same time. We already know that,
Right.
especially
You
when
can
we
only
don't have
do one
much
thing,
space.
yeah.
Right, so understanding popularity, understanding where there are waiting lines, understanding where other centers that have bigger facilities have waiting lines. Or they could take more people. They could allow some writing folks to come in,
or something like arts and crafts,
arts and crafts.
which is you need storage space. It can't be some sort of thing like other activities where then you just, everything is, you need to have like a separate area. Ceramics is something other people do. I mean, I think it's good to know, to really nail down, you have it here, which is good, the space limitations. What are some things that other places are doing that our space doesn't allow us to do? You have some of that here.
Yeah, but suddenly if we add three new spaces, what happens? What are we gonna put in?
Oh, you could.
Oh, no, there's
You can put a
no
lot.
end. There's-
Well, I'll tell you, Mark, because I know, 'cause I hear
Yes,
it every
yes, you
night.
know.
I know, right? It's space, Anna could fill that room with lots of things, but she can't turn over the room in time. So.
But that's kind of our given.
it's-
That's where we already know that, right?
Right.
That's the given. Now we're saying, okay, now we're talking about a new facility, what are we gonna do?
But, you
can't do everything. I mean, it's lovely to think about it, but you can't.
Can I make us some couple
Almost
suggestions,
everything.
observations?
Yeah.
Just ask Jenna, she has the money.
So I think it would be helpful, so when we did the initial survey and report, while we did structure and organize some things out, it was my, I'll say opinion, that it was done at a somewhat high level, broad brush view. And I was actually hoping that as part of the programming review, we would actually really try to get down to some brass tacks. And let me give you some examples. What I was thinking is that for very specific programming, and I don't care if you have a list of 20 or 30, 60 long, identify what are the challenges, what are the things that keep us from, executing that program. Is it something that we should be doing from a priority perspective here? Is it being done somewhere else? How do we finance that program? Is there a cost that we should have, or do we have a challenge getting an instructor that we have to pay for, or do we have to subsidize? I actually, and I don't know, and by the way, I don't know what all those questions and things might be, but I think that it was my hope that we would take that opportunity to kind of delve into it a little bit more deeply. And it isn't because Chris hasn't done a great job looking at other programs in other communities. I would agree with you. That is certainly a challenge, but I think for us to really get our arms around that so that we can actually plan and look at that list in the end and say, well, even if we had all the space in the world, we still can't do this program because of X, Y, and Z. It's only space, but we do have to do some financial things, or this doesn't have that great of a requirement here, and it's also being done somewhere else. So I was thinking that it could help kind of craft not only the programmatic implementation of today and the future, but also potentially somewhat along the ideas of space. You raised in here a point that I've always had in my mind about, well, we don't have good dance space, or we don't have a good theater space. So those are things that I would like to see in that list. That it'd be great to have a stage, or a one of the rooms that where you do either exercise and or dance, where you have mirrors on the walls and you have things like so. But I think it's really important that we didn't get down to that level of detail in the prior work. And I'm not suggesting I know all the questions to ask or even what all the answers are, but I think it would be worth kind of laying that out, because I think it will help us when we go to start look specifically at things that we want in some of these explicit designs that we do. And also from a programmatic perspective, which I know you're already doing. You're already prioritizing, you're already making decisions about what things to run with. So I know that's already being done. So I'm not trying to, again, I'm still not trying to say that you're not doing that. I just think it would be a worthwhile effort to really flesh that out in much more detail and have a perspective that impacts not only what we as Recalc do from a space perspective, but it's also going to impact financial pieces. It's going to impact all the things that we're dealing with. So I really think it's worth, and maybe even to the point of estimating, well, you could say, okay, well, we do this program. If you give us enough space, we can continue to fill the room. Well, that may be true, but where is the point where you say, well, what is the realistic thing? Well, we can't actually do a Zumba class with more than 40 people. It just gets out of hand. And so, there may be things like that.
Well, some of the things the instructors tell you.
Right, well, but like I'm saying, so there's things like that we should just, I think that information's already known. I think we know, but I just would love to see it all in one place so we can really take
It's a lot of work.
It is a lot of work. Yes,
I know it is.
It is a lot of work. I am not underestimating.
What program can be consuming?
I am
How
not
much detail goes behind
underestimating the effort that each of these working groups needs to undertake. And I'm not suggesting that it's gonna be the most thorough, every stone unturned thing, but I think it'd be good to do at least a first pass through that for the core things that we know we need to do or that we wanna do. I think
two things, though, John. Well, it's the short-term and long-term, you've pointed that out, is that we're not gonna have a new senior center, minimum 3 years, 5 years, that kind of thing. And so we have time on more, but we do need to do some of this work so that it can feed into the feasibility study. So it's kind of like, how much do we need for the feasibility study, which I don't have a good handle on, but that's why we need to get as much information as possible. Totally agree. But all I'm saying is, what's that point? I don't have a good feel for.
I think you made a good point, John, too, is you kind of start, and I think maybe it was even Mark, you just start by asking the basic questions, right? Like, what are your 5 most popular programs? How much space do you need to run those programs? How much space do you currently have at your facility? What's an innovative program that you've brought in the past 2 years that has excelled? Right. I don't think it has to be anything like super, super detailed in that first pass through. It just has to be some basics. Like Nora, when you went to your fitness class, was it Zumba? Was it Zumba that you went to?
No, it was yoga.
Yoga? Oh. So there you go. So
But all the I can tell you right now, all the fitness
yoga was
classes
filled
are
up,
priority.
but maybe you go and you ask Stoneham if yoga's filled up there, and maybe it isn't. So it'd just be interesting to see from place to place, what's popular, what's not, how much space that has to support what's needed, the max amount of people that a particular instructor could take for a yoga class or a Zumba class. And I think Chris could be super helpful in that way too, and even myself, and asking some of like those core questions. So it does sound overwhelming, and there is so much detail that goes into programming, and I was a program coordinator for rec for a long time. So I understand and I know how hard everyone works at the center,
But you know you needed that information to really be able to plan out your all those pieces.
yes,
And where
absolutely,
things were gonna go and
Right.
how are you gonna, so
right,
it is ultimately information that's necessary, and a lot of it is probably known, it's just that it's never actually been put down in one place.
right,
So,
Well, I'll just give you an example, and I know that the space has been allocated for that center through January.
I believe it.
Filled.
Yeah.
With programming. Can't fit anything else. So the program coordinator, my wife, has to refuse people to do something
So-
because there's no space.
So let me just take that one
And
step
that's-
further.
Document that.
and
Right,
that's what
so-
happens in rec too, you know, there's always gonna be a max amount of people you can take.
There's
Our number.
opportunities to run dual programs if you had space.
So
Okay, let's
can't
look
do
at
that.
Yeah.
John and.
Right, so let's take that one step further. Mark just raised a good point. We have some opera funds right now. What if we said, well, geez, this program here is so much in high demand, we could run it, 3 extra times a week if we had another place to do it. Well, let's go rent some space somewhere and get a thing and do it or something.
We did try to do that.
And I mean,
Well,
But-
or at night or on.
right,
on
so
Friday.
The night
it may
requires staffing.
it may be that you already know the answers to some of these questions in terms of what we could do, and maybe, again, we're not the ones, Recalc's purpose is not necessarily to drive current operational
Right.
planning, we get that.
Right.
But at the same time, if we, in our efforts, identify things that are helpful and worthy to feed back into it, by all means, we
Well,
should
when
do
we
that.
when we went through the whole Walgreens situation, we identified key areas
Space.
that were required.
Right.
Right? A multi-purpose room, a fitness
The
room,
kitchen.
a kitchen,
So why would
a
we-
lounge area. All those things were identified. So that's gonna go back into that feasibility study. Because the programming aspect of it, there's tons of programming that you can add once you get the space.
So 2 things on that. One of the things that we talked about doing was thinking about the future budget. So what we're talking about here, we'll help define what that needs to be.
Okay.
So, staffing, outside
Staffing,
folks.
Transportation,
Right, so everything here feeds together really, really nicely. I think that the most helpful is absolutely not to just rehash, lists and things, but to be specific and say, okay, so, we know that this is in, huge demand. We talked about a space need associated with it. What else is involved with that? What else do we need to do? And maybe or maybe not, we just, you can take 40 people or whatever, but knowing that would say, okay, that needs to be run more frequently. So when you're doing that programming, it's like, oh, okay, so I had to count on this 2 a day, not 1 a day, or whatever that is, which means other things won't happen in that space.
Couple of things, because this came up at the public meetings, and I'm sure it'll come up in the future. How are we tying into other community supports? Library comes up, and like when employment, library does do some things on employment. Maybe that's, instead of having to do that at the senior center now, which they don't have the space to do it, possibility. Rec, we've talked about that on the finance side of it as far as the revolving fund and extending it, but that needs to connect to the program thing.
All of this stuff is related.
And a big thing is the school department. People keep, I know Rex had a problem. Can we break through that somehow or other? Because they do have facilities that, aren't being used all the time. You got the field house, they have gyms at different places. I know there's a staffing thing and everything else, but are they willing to go down the road with us on that? Because that's for the next few years anyway,
We could take that on as identifying programs that could be run at any number of places and don't have to be specifically at a senior center. Require staffing, coordination, renting space, whatever, all the other things that are required.
Sure, and I think too, we do rent space from the schools and rec. We pay a fee yearly to use the school facilities. And I think the concern with the staff over there with extra supplemental space is the fact that they prefer staff to be there if someone is over a certain age bracket, or because they're just a little bit concerned seniors are vulnerable. Maybe a school isn't as accessible as another school is. It's easier to get into a school, it's easier to find the gym, it's easier to enter into the library than it is into some other facility. So there's definitely an untapped opportunity to use more of the school facilities at night for senior programming.
Also, as we're talking, I'm thinking, I don't know whose assignment this would be, but the UU Church just down the street from me, because I live on Somewhere Avenue, have a nice facility. Easy access, separate, you don't have to go through the church building, St. Agnes has a place, that's not being utilized most of the time, during the daytime.
Sure.
They certainly could use the revenue. Yeah.
Does the town have to RFP simple rentals like that?
I think if it's over a certain
Certain amount of money.
Yeah, but
you could
it's.
try it
Yeah, it's not like
once a month.
$100,
Right.
a couple $100.
It would be great if they
Much higher
competed
than
for
that.
it.
Well, no, I'm just,
No,
I'm just wondering about the
Yeah.
municipal.
We should see what the threshold is, but I think, a few rentals, I doubt it.
Like if you said, hey, geez, we have a definite need for an additional program, we need some space, and we, St. Agnes Church or UU Church or whatever, one of these halls says, hey, we'll rent you out every Tuesday night from 7 to 9 or 4 to 7 or whatever it is.
Whatever it is.
Yeah, actually, it might be a
daytime,
bonus
those-
to RFP it,
Yeah.
because then you lay out the requirements and you learn things like which facilities are more accessible,
So,
things like that.
There is a big elephant in the room about this, by the way, and I think everybody knows that, is that, we don't know where the feasibility study is gonna go. But one of the options obviously is what happens if we decide we're gonna renovate our current senior center? You're gonna be in a situation where you're gonna lose access to that thing for what,
2 years at
a
least.
year, 2 years?
Oh, yeah.
Where do you go at that point? Now you just take that entirely off the table, so you really have to start.
You rent the place down by Demoulas or by Market Basket.
Not by market, but like the library did.
Yeah, where the library went, yeah.
You need to start establishing those types of questions and answers now, I think, in some respects.
So that-
I
So-
think doing this
My
actually-
folks, I need to leave. I'm sorry. I had the prior commitment at 7:30 that I forgot about.
Hey, Michael, thanks.
We'll see you.
Mike,
Sure. Thanks, Mike.
You're talking about some of these facilities in the evening. The senior center's not open. So
Right,
that,
but
there's
Most of these
a.
facilities are open during the day, they're empty.
Right,
During
yes,
the day.
I was talking
You don't have to worry about
churches.
nights.
Oh, during the day, okay.
Oh, yeah.
Okay, all right.
Any time during the day, basically.
Yes.
During the day, it would be a lot easier to access them too, for the most part,
Yeah.
because they have staff in there during the day.
Yeah.
Schools are out because, at least maybe in the summertime, but.
I'm just thinking like the churches and stuff, you're
Yeah.
not gonna have
Air
somebody.
Clearing the schools,
Association
huh?
would be an interesting
Yeah.
pool to,
and we have used the library for wellness
library,
Wednesdays
yeah.
and things like that.
Right.
And we are
But
going
it
to
does have to
Hillview
be
for an event.
handicapped accessible.
Yes, yeah.
Well, most of them are because they have to
That's why
be.
I
Some of them are
thought the
very
UU church,
old,
because
yeah, that one's
that's-
very,
Yeah,
modern.
and there's a ramp at St. Agnes, so they redid the thing, so they have to.
St. Agnes is one level and that whole thing's just
Yeah.
been renovated. I mean, there's other places in the community where you can get some access to.
Yeah, it'd be very
space.
helpful if you could look into the supplemental program space with the churches and things like that. I know that's been on Chris's list to do, and Anna, but Anna's really just
What the
starting off
churches
and
offer,
tackling all the,
What
Yeah.
the churches currently offer.
yeah, they'd be willing to rent space and what's available.
You know what would be good, when
that
I
would
think
be-
of this,
that would be
the sort of
great.
thing that we could utilize, is could you get a work study student? What?
you're an intern.
Yeah, no, really,
Well, we are hiring a volunteer coordinator. We're hoping to post that within the next couple weeks, so we're hoping that that person could also
Get a
help increase our
physical.
pool of volunteers and
Yeah.
get a volunteer that
Senior
could help us expand on some of this stuff.
I have someone you can talk to that can help go through some of the supplemental space, who's
Okay.
involved with some of those organizations and can get you answers actually maybe even more quickly.
Great,
Awesome.
thanks, John.
Right, yeah. And volunteer, when did you say, I'm sorry, the timeline for a volunteer call?
We're hoping to post it within the next couple weeks.
Oh, great.
Yeah. Yep, and that's a ARPA funded position.
Scary.
Any other comments? That working group, or any
So
other?
do you folks have thoughts on how to move forward?
No, Michael's our chair, yeah,
Yeah, so I was gonna say, I think that,
it's,
yeah, it's probably time to meet and talk about, set some
And how you're gonna step
priorities.
through the process and what
Yeah.
things you're gonna do and who's gonna do what and what other needs you have. That's the other thing, is if you have specific needs that you don't have, you know, whether it's resources or whatever, you gotta bring that back to all of us and we'll try to help figure that out for you.
Yeah, and that's another good question too, is the supplemental space. What do other towns do? Do they have that issue, like North Reading? They have a worse center than ours. So what do they do? Do they use any churches or school space, things like that? That would be a great question to ask.
Side thought, but maybe related thought. What if you were to hire an intern? So volunteer coordinator, great, better, first,
Yeah.
go, awesome.
No,
But
not-
maybe
in
there's an
addition-
intern opportunity,
Yeah.
Sure,
using some of the ARPA funds to pay.
Get
That's
somebody
certainly in scope,
good, yeah.
certainly in scope.
not an impossibility. Be a college student
Yes.
in gerontology or
Talk to
programming
UMass Center,
or
yeah,
transportation.
Talk to UMass.
They probably already
Yeah,
have a
that's
bunch
an
of
act-
folks
that's
who are
actually-
looking
Yeah,
for
They
it.
yeah.
do have,
Get a grad
that's,
student.
that's part of the, they have
Yeah.
they do at least one study every year. They have a group of students that focus, they go to a particular community, and if you give them a little money, that would probably that'd be a great
I
inducement.
know they had a couple of nurses from one of the colleges come down. They
Oh,
were-
yeah, get to the center,
Yeah, I
yeah.
forget what college, it was a nursing school of some sort,
I
but they were doing
also-
things like
okay.
that.
Yeah, I know Salem State students go to Salem Senior
Regis?
Center and
Was it
do
Regis?
blood pressure clinics.
You'd have to
Regis,
line that
it could
up
be
pretty
Regis.
soon.
Yeah, but a grad student potentially. I am getting all sorts of requests from grad students for, being a research assistant, teaching assistant, just gazillions of requests. Reason to get them every year.
And the biggest thing is the staffing, right? So, how do you staff those other supplemental areas?
I think best thing would be understand what do you need?
Right,
Yeah.
so that's what the.
Gonna have someone oversight.
What's
Setting
the
up.
oversight, who's the instructor, is that?
Set up, who's gonna set up, who's gonna,
Yeah, well, sometimes the facilities, depending on how much
That
they
comes with
charge
the
you,
rental
that may be
fee,
part of
potentially,
it.
yeah.
These students are all used to doing spreadsheets and everything else, I mean, it'd be like,
so what do we want the students to do?
I would suggest, you folks ought to probably talk about how to prioritize here a little bit, but if you wanted to do, depending on your colleague, the person you know, if they can bring in information, great, that may just take care of it. If not, they could do this research really quickly and
Okay,
get it onto a spreadsheet, that would be fantastic. Setting up that spreadsheet for the programming at different centers and things like that, somebody's gonna do that. Maybe we can volunteer Mike to do that.
and I think it goes right to number 4 on the agenda, steps on how to collect information from other towns. If you had somebody that this was their job,
Well, I think I think each of the groups have identified some aspect in their work plan that relies on more info.
Right.
From other communities. As I said, when we talked about the finance piece, my suggestion would be to, each group develop the list of questions or pieces of information that they want to gain more info on and solicit. And then we put it together as a group and come up with, okay, how do we want to do this? I mean, maybe the answer is we do kind of what we did at in the last go round. We come up with a survey and we assign people to go to the different towns, and even I think we kind of agreed that it'd be good to have the conversation and the person right in front of them, because that always facilitates the exchange of information, but at the same time still have that list of questions that we want to make sure we get answers to. So I actually think we're basically going to do that all over again in some respects. But we may be I would hope this time around we'll probably be more targeted on exactly what we want, and maybe even might cull down the list of all the communities that we want to go look at. So I don't know.
Should that be the charge for every one of the working groups now?
I think every working group should come back with specific info that they want to solicit from other centers, and then we'll put that together as an activity that we as Recalc do solicit ourselves.
Can I suggest, do it as kind of each group does kind of I'm gonna call it a bigger list, all the stuff you'd like to know. And then use an asterisk or whatever to highlight what do we absolutely have to walk away with. So because if we come out with a list of 400 questions.
Yeah, I'm hoping that that's not the case. I mean, even
Around 20 is, I think, good if like there's 5 from each group or 6 from each group.
yeah, I mean,
Small groups?
I think we just put it together and see what it is, and then we can certainly call it down.
Yeah.
I mean, even in the finance stuff, we're not really necessarily talking about, I mean, a lot
We don't
of-
have to ask all the questions of every place. In other words, if we identify some places that are really good for transportation,
Right.
Yep.
you know,
Do transport thing.
we
Sure.
can, yeah.
Yeah, no, I think we'll be in a better position this time around.
That sounds like that. So that will be
Assignment.
the assignment for each work group, so that's a concrete thing.
So really, it's the 3 working groups, because the fourth
Yes,
one is
right,
the.
yeah, the 3 working groups. Yep. Let's see. Oh, do we need well, we should raise it because it came up in finance work group, but we already utilized one additional person on the transportation, but discussion of additional non-recalc members helping in the working groups. So these would be like unofficial, just
Yeah,
Or like your contact, you mean?
well, yeah, I mean, I'm just gonna say, hey, you got a few minutes, talk to Nora, talk and see what she needs, and I'm sure he can help you get some more information or give you the right contacts or know exactly what you're looking for. I've reached out to a couple folks independently based on discussions we had to see if some folks be willing to roll up their sleeves and help us a little bit of work on the finance piece. I think it's really to some extent, informal more than anything else, because we're not looking to add them necessarily as associates. We're not going back to we're not asking select board to expand the group. We're basically just looking for some additional people to help, do some heavy lifting or some light lifting, hopefully.
Right.
With collecting information and, supporting some of the things. And
like on the program side, or there may be some eager beavers who are regular attendees of this Pleasant Street Center, who'll be willing to do something.
I can think of one.
Careful what you wish for.
Non-staff.
She's not staff.
Non-staff.
Yeah, someone on the COA might be willing to help too.
Because otherwise, it can be overwhelming.
Awesome.
So I guess the only question is, there's no prohibition for us doing this, is that
Correct.
fair
There's no
statement?
prohibition at all.
So then I would say we just handle it in each group to solicit input and feedback and support however we would normally do it, and we're not officially asking them to do anything beyond that.
Right, and they don't have to be involved in the regular meetings or anything, just could be a particular task.
Right.
It's easier to get people to do.
Yeah, no, I call up someone, hey, do you mind making a couple phone calls for me and do some internet searches and what, that's an easy thing to do. Anybody can do that. So, I mean, That's kind of, at least that very basic level of things that we can ask. But, if we can find folks that are willing to do some like, as you talked about, kind of segmenting that information in bite-sized pieces, that's really, I think, would be the helpful piece for us.
And I realized in doing some research that trying to get budget information from these other communities online, oh my God. It's just isn't available on a couple of them.
I will tell you, when I was looking at some of the communities, it's very difficult to find the budget details the way we have it set up
Right.
here. And even some of the online systems that you have, when you go on and say, oh, I want this budget line out or whatever, you don't know what you're getting.
Yeah.
You really don't. So,
I think if we found that there were certain communities we're really interested in,
Yeah.
I wonder if Sharon knows some of her counterparts in other communities.
Yeah.
Oh,
And
that's a
maybe,
good idea. Yeah.
would they be willing to, if we have a narrow list, to help out that way.
Is that specific to the senior center or the whole senior programming besides senior center stuff?
Well,
I think it's both.
Yeah, it would have to be,
We're
yeah.
looking for both.
Oh, yeah.
And we're trying to understand some of the comparative funding, different things, maybe that's how we can get some of that information.
Well, I know, with Anna talking to the senior centers, when they mentioned we got ARPA funding, they're all jealous that we get the ARPA funding to spend stuff, so.
And they don't.
They don't.
We have to make sure we're making good comparisons too, like we put all our, the taxes and all that stuff in accommodated costs or whatever we call it. Do they do that in the other ways in other budgets? I don't know how they break those
Yeah,
up.
This could be a bigger task.
Right, so you.
Well, all the fringe benefits and those kinds of things, at least in the communities that do, they do it. So I don't know if it's state regulation that all goes into like the administrative side of it.
I don't think so. But anyway, one question we'll answer that.
Okay.
Right.
Is this included in your salary line, yes or no? I'm sure they'll say no, it's a benefits line somewhere.
I remember when I first learned that, was the city of Malden, when we were living there. They had a forum, not many parents showed up. I was there, and that was one of the questions, trying to get some cost information. And I said, so this is in fringe benefits? Oh, no. So how do you get, that's not part of our budget.
I mean, worst case, look, we do a baseline budget, we can just go through and take the total benefits lines and find out what percent that is of the total salary lines. It's gonna be around 30%.
1.2, 1.25, whatever the answer is, right? That's all you do.
30%, and then
Right.
you use it.
Right, that's all you do.
And to get us started, that's fine.
30%'s probably not far off.
No, it's actually gonna be really close to that number.
Okay, is there any other business for us?
Just an update, I did not, since our last meeting, I didn't do anything with regards to the communication plan. I was gonna kind of write up a summary and send it over to COA, and it fell off the bottom of the plate. So,
Right, because you were gonna.
I'm sorry,
It's off this month, right?
yeah, so
COA is off.
yeah, they're
Yes,
off,
I don't have a meeting.
they're not meeting till August, I think. or something.
Right, yeah.
Yeah, so.
So I'm not necessarily behind it, but I wanted to get it done, and I'll still do that, so.
This is your old copy, by the way.
No, you can keep it.
Oh, okay. All right, so I'll entertain a motion to, no, we need to schedule the next meeting. Schedule the next meeting, sorry about that.
Need to attack, but.
Yeah.
Get a motion to adjourn. It's not debatable.
Right.
Oh, actually, can I bring up one quick topic? You mentioned Mystic Valley Elder Services. This keeps coming up, and so I finally looked and tried to figure out who is the liaison to Mystic Valley Elder Services? Me and Karen.
Oh, you're kidding.
So I'm gonna take on to reach out to MVES. I'll talk to Karen about it as well.
Okay.
I didn't realize that, but I.
And if there are any other questions, because like I said, I'm meeting with them next Monday.
So
So
they're gonna see this email from me, so who are you meeting with?
I'm meeting with Lisa.
Lisa, that's who I'm about to
And
send
then,
the email.
what's that, Reed? Something Reed, who's
Oh,
the
yeah.
program.
Lauren Reed,
Lauren Reed.
Director of Community Programs,
Yeah.
yeah, she was the other one I was gonna send it to.
The CFO I've known for years.
Sorry, okay, next meeting.
Alrighty.
So can I make a suggestion? So I'd like an opportunity between now and the next meeting for each of the, well, I know our working group, I'd like us to meet again.
Yep, same
So,
thing, Chris. Well, to do the questions, I mean.
Well, we have, we have stuff we wanna do, so I'm thinking at least give us 3 weeks between now and the next recog meeting. If
Oh,
not, unless you wanna push it an entire month, which I wouldn't be adverse to either. But either the 16th or the 23rd of August, but let's see what the rest of the people think about that.
16th kind of early. I don't know if I could get a
Yeah, the 23rd.
in. Or do we
And
want to?
actually, you're going away sometime soon, aren't you?
I'm not gonna be reachable for the next 2 weeks.
Yeah.
Oh. Yeah, so maybe the last week of
So maybe target towards the end of August as
Yes.
Like 30th?
30th,
30th is.
It's a Wednesday.
Wednesday, okay.
Not good.
It's 30th.
works for me.
Okay.
same time, 6:30, August 30th.
Jenna, get us a meeting.
Yep, sure.
Ready for that motion now?
Now I'm ready for the motion.
Motion to adjourn.
Okay.
You don't need to do roll call because we're all physically here.
Oh, okay. Oh, I didn't, oh, that was the reason why we always had to do that.
Yep.
Okay. So Ron Asini,
Yes.
Nora Bucko,
Yes.
John Sasso,
Yes.
Mark Doxer.
Yes.
John O'Neill, yes.
Mr. Chairman. You could actually even just do a.
Yeah, everybody raise their hands
Oh,
at that point, but that's okay.
All right.
It would
Yeah, we
just,
don't need roll call.
it would just
Just
quickly
like-